finally back, but after 3 weeks, did anything really change?
I'm reliving the same day over and over.
From the stadiums to politics, we're giving you 3 weeks in review for the price of one. Stay with us.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize, and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees. The Francis Family Foundation through the discretionary fund of David and Janice Francis. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick Haines. Have you missed us? Well, we've been gone with our extended membership drive. That's why you saw Willie Nelson's 90th birthday concert in this slot last week and a Pavarotti special the week before. But I hope we can be just as entertaining around this table. What you may not know is that former star reporter Dave Helling is also an expert on the Beatles. KCWA's Lisa Rodriguez has her own multiple talents, and we already know that Eric Wesson from Next Page KC is a fashion show all by himself, the best-dressed man in Kansas City media. And we're thrilled to have with us this week the Kansas City Star's Kacen Bayliss, who can do the unthinkable, cover Topeka, Jefferson City, and City Hall in Kansas City, all in the same week. Now, as we were wrapping up our last show around this table 3 weeks ago now, Dave Helling asked me, how would I feel if the Royals announced their new stadium decision while we were gone during our membership drive? Well, did I have anything to worry about, Dave? Did anything change whatsoever?
Apparently not. Nothing to worry about because we're still waiting. I did make some phone calls this week and talk to folks on the periphery of these discussions, people who one hopes would know or at least hear what's in the wind about what the Royals are thinking. And what I heard was people telling me that the finances of the stadium continue to be, it's not so much the location, it's just paying for it, particularly on the baseball side, that continues to be a concern. And there are whispers, Nick, that John Sherman, the owner of the Royals, is growing weary of being at the front of this parade and all the criticism that attaches to it. And so he's rethinking what role he plays with the baseball club. So
whether he steps back as the lead owner of the team?
Could be. So now, again, that's not confirmed. That's not John Sherman hasn't said that. No one with the Royals has said that. That's just what you hear from people, again, on the periphery. That doesn't mean it couldn't change in the next 2 weeks. We might get an announcement, but it does not appear likely.
It does appear that we're at a moment where time really is of the essence right now. I know we're already starting talking about a new mayor's race. I think Quentin Lucas is really a key player right now for the Royals in terms of financing and cutting a deal. And we're about to start a new Royals season. So I think really right now is when we are looking at an announcement from the Royals, from the city of Kansas City. In a year, Quentin Lucas won't be mayor anymore.
I guess one minor update on this is Mayor Quentin Lucas was in Arizona for the Royal Spring Training earlier this month. I spoke with him after that trip, and he's still expressing optimism that there could be some kind of decision by the springtime. But
even though we've got an April 7th earnings tax coming up, we got the World Cup, all of these other things that are bigger priorities right now, right?
Yeah, and he's still expressing that optimism. He did, Mayor Lucas and Jackson County Executive Phil Avoda have sort of promoted the idea that they think they can strike a deal before opening day. Lucas did caution that might be a little aggressive at this point.
Every time you appear on the show, Eric Wesson, you keep telling us that Ollie Gates, the barbecue magnate, still has hopes of bringing it to the area around 18th and Vine. Has he given up hope now at this point?
Last Friday I saw him, and that was still his vision in bringing that economic engine back into the urban core where it started.
So we could have been gone for 6 months and we may still be talking about it. It wouldn't have made any difference, Dave.
We should not lose sight of the idea that whatever the Royals decide, wherever it goes, north of the river, anywhere in Jackson County, that the contribution from the team will have to be substantial. The Chiefs are spending $1 billion for their stadium. You'd expect something close to that from the Royals for a new ballpark. And remember, if the Chiefs are building and the Royals are building at the same time, Nick, the costs of both projects will go up because the demand for labor will be bigger and the demand for materials. So Lisa's right. The the calendar is beginning to compress. The amount of money involved, interest rates are high. It's just a very, very dicey time.
Now, speaking of that Chiefs Stadium, Kansas lawmakers spent much of the week on what many of us thought was a done deal, the new Chiefs Stadium in Wyandotte County, where there were lots of verbal spats over what is being called a crucial vote to set up a public sports authority to take ownership of the new domed stadium. The Chiefs say without it, nearly 45% of the project's funding would be subject to federal taxes, blowing a massive hole in the stadium budget. But yet we're told by legislative leaders in Topeka who want this, none of it matters. We'll find another way of going around it. This whole public sports authority deal, we'll find something else. The deal is done.
The reason that there is a concern about taxability of the proceeds is not necessarily because there is or isn't a sports authority, Nick. It's because it has to be publicly owned. That's the concern, no matter what the structure is. What the Chiefs won't tell you or don't tell you is that the other great benefit of having a publicly owned stadium is they don't owe any property taxes on it. And in Wyandotte County, the property tax levy for a $3 billion stadium would not be cheap. So they've pushed pretty hard on this. There is concern about the Chiefs' seat at the table, voting seat on the authority. That makes you the landlord and the tenant at the same time.
Or as Senator Mike Thompson, the former Fox 4 weatherman, said, that this is like the fox guarding the hen house.
Yes, and so you're getting criticism from the right, but you're also getting it from Cindy Holscher on the left, who's running for governor. It'll be an interesting dynamic in the Senate with, by the way, just a couple of days to go.
But I think their most important part of this endeavor is going to be the community benefits agreement. Once they get through with the financing, they still have to address what's the benefit for Wyandotte County voters and taxpayers, rather, when this project comes into existence.
Now, since the last time we sat around this table, an FBI probe is sending shockwaves through the corridors of Kansas City Hall in Kansas City, according to news reports. Mayor Pro Tem Rihanna Parks Shaw and her husband, Kansas City Public Works Director Michael Shaw, are at the center of a public corruption investigation. Now, isn't she considered to be the front runner to succeed Quinton Lucas as the next mayor of Kansas City?
Well, Rihanna Parks Shaw, as Mayor Pro Tem, certainly has one of the highest profile and most name recognition of the people who have announced so far. And so an FBI probe is not a great look. Still, there's more we don't know than what we do know about this. There's no wrongdoing that has been confirmed so far. And the sources that have spoken to media outlets who have been anonymous so far, although I trust the Star and I trust Kacen's sourcing on this, have said that they were asked about a wide array of things, not just Rihanna Parks Shaw and Michael Shaw and their activity.
So couldn't it be really unfair then to be sort of damaging her reputation in this way when the FBI has said absolutely nothing, and it could be about something completely different?
I think that, whether it's fair or not, the politics of this, there's so much that's unknown about what this investigation is like, what the exact target of the investigation is, that, I think that's still something that we're working to figure out. What we do know is that there have been multiple former city employees that have been interviewed by the FBI being asked a wide range of questions, all of them sort of centered around the Mayor Pro Tem, but also contracts and donations throughout the city.
The Mayor Pro Tem, though, has already held fundraisers. She's been the most visible candidate for mayor, and that race, of course, is just, a year away. Is there any evidence that some people are now distancing themselves from her, or that she's considering dropping out of the race?
I don't think she's going to drop out of the race as of my last conversation with her, but I think people are going to be leery about what's going on with it until something is finalized. I think her biggest thing, if she does stay in the race, where she's going to raise a lot of money, is for public relations, because this is just a bad look. Even though you don't know what the FBI is looking for, they go in looking for oranges and find apples and oranges and grapefruit. So it's been a very interesting concept for him.
A couple things to keep in mind. We don't know the specifics, of course, of this wide-ranging probe, if you will, at City Hall. But in some ways, the federal government is always keeping an eye on places like Kansas City, Missouri city government. they get tips all the time, Nick. When I worked at City Hall, there were always rumors of the FBI calling this person or that person about some concerns. And what I was told years ago was to keep in mind that what looks bad politically, potential conflict of interest, is not necessarily illegal or can yield a case that's provable in federal court. So we need to be a little bit skeptical is not the right word, but just a little bit leery of condemning anybody based on these early rumors, because it may look bad, but may not be something that violates the law.
And for $201 worth of campaign contributions, is that enough to have such a large probe go into effect of what you're actually looking at?
Now, as the story, though, plays out, Jackson County Sheriff Darryl Forte is now apparently considering a run for mayor. If Shaw were to drop out of the race, does he become the front runner?
I think Darryl Forte is a really interesting candidate. He certainly has,
and he was the police chief too.
He was the police chief. He has name recognition. He has a law and order background. But also being police chief means you have a lot of history for people to cite good and bad. People can look at the crime rate during his tenure. He did not have a tenure that didn't have bumps in the road as well. And we also see the Jackson County Jail Detention Center opening this week without cooperation, without a Kansas City municipal jail as part of it. So there's a lot to cite, good and bad. So he's certainly an interesting candidate, certainly has name recognition, but it's not a sure thing.
I talked to him this morning at the ribbon cutting and opening of the county jail. And he
was trying to tap you as his communications director for the campaign, Eric.
No, he says he really doesn't have an interest in it because of the way the governing structure is, being able to work with a city council.
Even though there are push polls currently going on where people are getting phone calls asking about candidates and his name is mentioned as one of them?
I think whoever's doing the push poll just threw that in there just to see. But he assured me today that he has no interest in running as of today. Now, tomorrow might be something different this afternoon, but this morning when I talked to him, he had no interest in wanting to be a part of city council.
We haven't had somebody with a law enforcement background be the mayor of Kansas City, but we certainly saw that in Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas. Tyrone Garner came from law enforcement. How did that work out for him?
Well, not well for him. He spent a 4-year, one term at the head of the unified government and then decided not to run again. And there is a tradition in Kansas City of going for civilian leadership of the city council, so it's not surprising perhaps that Sheriff Forte is backing away. But again, caution. We're very early in this process, and a lot of people and a lot of names that we've never heard before, or at least not prominently, are probably looking at the race. It'll be another 6 months before we really get a sense of what the field will be.
Alrighty, well, speaking of running for office, while we were gone, one of Kansas City's best-known religious leaders announced he was weighing up a campaign to be the next U.S. Senator from Kansas. Adam Hamilton, pastor of Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, said he would embark on a listening tour of the state before considering a challenge to Republican Roger Marshall. Well, he's now back from a 9-city road trip that's taken him from Dodge City to Russell, Kansas. Is he in or out or still on the fence, Kacen?
We haven't seen an announcement yet.
Okay.
I do think that it is one of the most interesting storylines in this election season. It's a real test of whether you can take your personal, your very popular personal brand and transition that into votes. And there's still an open question of whether, if he does run, whether that takes votes away from Roger Marshall, whether that takes votes away from a popular Democratic candidate, because he's saying he would run as an independent. It's certainly an interesting storyline.
And we had an independent run before, and that was Greg Orman back in 2014. He was the businessman from Johnson County, lots of money, cleared the field of the Democrat in that race and ran against Pat Roberts.
Right.
How did he fare?
Not well, although at the time there was a suggestion based on polling that he had a real chance to beat Pat Roberts, particularly when Chad Taylor, who was the Democratic nominee from the primary, decided to get out of the race, which, by the way, as you'll recall, touched off legal challenges from the Republicans trying to keep him on the ballot, but they failed in that regard. So it was a Greg Orman versus Pat Roberts race, and yet Orman lost by 10, 11 points, in part because, Nick, his whole campaign was based on the idea that I'm an independent, that I'm not one of them. Well, that'll get you somewhere down the road. But at some point, people start saying, okay, what's your position on taxes and spending and national defense? And he really didn't have good answers for any of that. Pat Roberts had been around forever. It wasn't close.
I think Adam Hamilton is a different candidate than Greg Orman was. Roger Marshall is a different candidate than Pat Roberts was,
no question.
and is not universally lauded as well. So it's, I think, as Kacen said, a really interesting candidate, and I think one that caught us by surprise. I don't think we were expecting.
But would people be willing to vote for an independent candidate when there are multiple Democrats in this race? And isn't Sharice Davids, the Kansas congresswoman, still considering the race, Kacen?
She's still considered a likely candidate. We still, very similar to Hamilton, have not seen her actually jump into the race. But yeah, I mean, just going back to Hamilton very briefly, I think that, he weighed in on the shooting of Alex Preddy, like, from the pulpit. There have been a lot of, like, sort of controversial issues that he's weighed in from the pulpit. It'll be really interesting to see whether he jumps into this race.
Well, Adam Hamilton, of course, would follow in the footsteps of Emanuel Cleaver, who went from the pulpit to politics, first as a city councilman, then mayor of Kansas City, and then congressman. But at age 81, is Congressman Cleaver about to rejoin civilian life? Just a few days ago, a Jackson County judge ruled that Missouri's newly congressional map is constitutional, which means Cleaver will have to campaign, it seems, in a totally reconfigured seat, which would see him lose a big chunk of Kansas City and be forced to represent huge parts of rural Missouri, right up to Jefferson City and Columbia. Does that spell the end of Cleaver's political career, Kacen?
I think there are still two very important variables to this entire situation. We're still waiting on two pretty, in my opinion, monumental court cases. The first is the Missouri Supreme Court is poised to rule on whether lawmakers legally were even able to hold a mid-decade redistricting legislative session. The other one is whether the map will be paused ahead of the 2026 election. That goes back to this referendum campaign where campaigners are seeking to strike down that map at the ballot box. So I think decisions in those two cases will really be the big test of whether Cleaver can hold on to this seat or whether it's going to be an uphill battle during this.
So just because a Kansas City a Jackson County judge ruled this way doesn't mean that's the end of the story then?
Certainly not. I think these two big decisions loom, and then we see what names surface to challenge Cleaver. I think he's still easily the most recognizable name in the race, but certainly, if this map stays in place ahead of the election, makes it a much more difficult race for him to win at a point where many people are eyeing and waiting and counting down, as we've asked many times on this program, whether he will run again.
Is he getting worried, Eric? Is there any evidence to suggest he says, I don't need it anymore, I'm going to retire?
No, I hadn't heard that from him or his campaign. I think his campaign is looking at Republicans who will work behind the scenes to help him in those rural areas where he has no base, because they've done this before. They took him down to Warrensburg and other places in rural Missouri, and he still won. So I think he's looking at, getting those Republicans, even though they voted for it, a lot of them didn't want to, but they didn't want to upset the Trump administration and not supporting them doing the redistricting. So, but it'll be interesting if they do keep this map, whether Mark Alford will be able to keep his seat, because I think
because he will have all of Kansas City that is in Cleaver's district, that is west of Troost Avenue.
Yeah, he will have the corridor, what we always have called the corridor, where A, there are a lot of Democratic votes typically, and B, they turn out a lot, more than perhaps any other part of Kansas City. And so you put those things together, if I were Mark Alford, I'd be a little nervous about it. And just to fill out the deck here, they're still counting signatures on the petition to put this on the ballot, and they almost certainly this week will go over the minimum required, and that triggers the whole discussion about whether or not the map is put aside while we're waiting for that.
Lisa mentioned,
Mayor Lucas and Alford would be a good race.
That could still happen. Now, after years of planning and construction, as Lisa mentioned a little earlier in the program, that $317 million Jackson County Detention Center finally opens this week. Planning for it, built on the site of a former mobile home park, began in 2019. The new jail was designed to ease overcrowding at the county's downtown lockup, which was more than 40 years old. But if you remember, in an ironic twist, we were told last fall that the new 1,000-bed facility would be at overcapacity the day it opens. Is that still the case, Eric?
I think they're going to be close to capacity, if not over capacity, when it opens up. So it's going to be interesting how they trim it down. And now we've got to get tough on crime mentality in Jackson County.
Lisa, I also noticed from KCUR that they also lost the Jackson County Detention Center director. The person who's going to be leading it just resigned, too.
It does prompt questions about what's going on behind the scenes, that she would resign just ahead of the opening. It does look like she's found a place in Kansas City where she'll still be in the detention center sphere. But it is interesting for the jail to open without kind of a strong set leader at this time.
Just connecting the dots again, the Jackson County Sheriff, that also oversees the detention center, is thinking about potentially becoming mayor of Kansas City. Who's going to be left over there? Now, I said we always look at bewildering stories that are head-scratchers. This seemed a head-scratcher for many of our viewers this week. The Kansas City Symphony exploring plans for a new 4,000-seat performance venue on the Plaza, or should I say just a block south of the shopping district, on land next to the Kansas City Plaza Library. What? Are they done with the Kauffman Center for the Performing Arts, Dave?
First, a tip of the cap to my colleague Melinda Hindenburger, who broke this story. She got a tip, and on our Substack.
It was the only one that Kacen didn't break this week.
Yeah, exactly. There is a lot of head scratching going on because this doesn't, at the surface level anyway, make a lot of sense. In part because the expense to build a new hall would be enormous. You would have to raise the money from private sources at a time when private sources are being asked, as you well know, Nick, to supplement other media outlets and other things in the Kansas City area. That's going to make it difficult. And then it is, to some degree, redundant with the Kauffman Performing Arts Center. It does, I think, under the surface suggest there is some tension between the symphony and the people who run the PA.
What do you think, Lisa,
we don't know about.
They could do that they couldn't do at the Kauffman Center?
Props to Dave and Melinda and for breaking this, because KCUR hasn't been able to confirm it, and the symphony's not talking at all yet. But it would be a much larger space than what is available at the Kauffman Center for Performing Arts. So I have a lot of questions. I'm eager to hear from the symphony on this. I'm eager to hear from the Kauffman Center and see, is the symphony selling out to all of their performances? Yeah. Is there a need for a space that is this much larger than what they have, and what I will say is beautiful at the Kauffman Center for the Performing Arts? And I'd love to hear from musicians in the symphony as well.
One benefactor of this whole experience, if it happens, would be the Country Club Plaza, though. Now you've got 4,000 people who will be looking perhaps to have a restaurant meal or go shopping right next to the plaza. That's going to help them.
Yeah, that will help them tremendously. And they need some help tremendously as well with something to create some foot traffic coming into that area.
Now, when you put a program like this together every week, you can't get to every story grabbing the headlines. What was the big local story we missed? Kansas City turns green, and our World Cup committee breathes a big sigh of relief as the federal government finally releases the long-delayed cash we've been counting on to secure the tournament. The first detainees start filling beds at the new ICE jail in Leavenworth. Opponents of a $150 billion data center in Independence, Missouri are hoping a judge rules this week on their bid to block the project through a public referendum. City leaders argue it's too late to stop the facility. And it's March Madness, not college hoops, but the weather, from ice, snow, and hailstorms to record-breaking heat, all in the same week. Alrighty, Lisa, did you pick one of those stories or something completely different?
Man, it's been so newsy. All of those stories are so worthwhile. But I picked something different. Faculty and staff at KU, in an informal straw poll, overwhelmingly voted no confidence in their chancellor. That was reported by KCUR's Sam Zeff this week. That is following news that KU athletics will have a budget deficit of about $15 million, and that KU is planning to pull from their general fund and tuition to pay student athletes. So a lot of questions about finances at the University of Kansas right now, about transparency, and clearly faculty and staff are unhappy about it.
Eric, what did you put down?
Well, you know, Gwen Grant, the president and CEO of Urban League, announced her retirement this week. City councilwoman.
Is it to run for mayor?
No.
Okay, all right.
No, she appointed City Councilwoman Melissa Robinson as the COO that's going to take over, heir apparent. And also the City of Kansas City did something really strange. They created a community public safety committee to go along with all the other things that they're doing, and it just looks confusing, throwing all of these darts against the wall for public safety. What exactly will they do?
Thank you. Kacen.
Yeah, I picked something that is sort of poised to be one of the most seismic ballot measures in Missouri history, which is the overhaul of the initiative petition process. A Missouri judge earlier this month rewrote that ballot question, finding that the question was misleading. If you think about some of the most like hot button ballot issues that have been in Missouri, whether that's abortion rights, whether that's the increasing of the minimum wage, that's all gone through Missouri's initiative petition process.
Medicaid expansion?
Correct, yes. And
marijuana?
Yes. And that ballot measure would make it virtually impossible for any of those issues to have passed on the ballot. So that's something we're going to be following pretty closely.
I don't think we're completely clear on. Missourians will have enormous choices on the ballot this year. Initiative petition, abortion will be back on the ballot, income tax elimination potentially. That ballot's going to take everybody 2 hours to vote. My unreported story, just quickly, Nick, is as part of the discussion on the Sports Authority bill in the Kansas legislature, the representative of the Kansas Speedway said, hey, we'd like to be a part of this too. Maybe the Sports Authority could acquire the Speedway, in part because then we wouldn't have to pay property taxes when our current deal expires. And that was interesting. And this week, a legislator moved an amendment that would limit the authority to the football team only. It passed. The Speedway is out.
And on that, we will say, our week has been reviewed, courtesy of KCUR's Lisa Rodriguez and the Star's Kacen Bayliss. From Next Page KC, Eric Wesson, and news icon and Mr. Kansas City Stack on Substack, Dave Helling. A lot of S's there. And I'm Nick Haines. From all of us here at Kansas City PBS, be well, keep calm, and carry on.